All right. I think we are live once again. Let me get this tweet out of the way because that's how we do things to make sure that people know where to join us. But this is another session of NX Office Hours, and really excited to be getting back in the swing of things here after week. If you haven't seen it already, we had NX Conf a couple of weeks. It's been a couple of weeks ago now. We had last week, and now so that was a lot of fun. And now we're back on it with NX Office Hours to talk about or covering some more NX topics today. So one of the ones that has been highly requested, I would say, amongst the topics and things that we cover. And I have another Nrwlian today with me, Ben. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I waved the wrong hand. Okay, that's an entrance. Um, hey everyone, I'm Ben. Been working at Nrwlian for a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
I am on the NX core team and doing a lot of things for Nrwlian as a whole. Yeah, let's talk about workspace configuration. But since you just mentioned that everyone wanted to hear about that subject, like this is a lot of pressure now. So
No, hopefully it won't be
I
won't
think I
be too much
will.
pressure. I
Yeah,
think you'll be fine.
let's manage the expectations.
There you go. We're gonna gently introduce you to workspace configuration in X, which I think you've done some talks already about that there. So I think we can ease right into it. Let's
Mhm.
see, we got some people in the chat. Thanks for coming through. Um, so yeah. Uh, oh yeah. Real quick, I wanted to give you a shout out because you worked on. You said you worked at Naro for a while, and you did work a lot of work on the, if not all the work on the NXConf website also, as well as NX Dev. So definitely want to give you some props there for all the people who got to enjoy that website,
Thanks.
and I got to tinker with it some, and I only had to tweak a few things here and there, but he did a lot of cool stuff there. So um, there's that. Like I said, if we and we got some, like I said, we got some people in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we will answer the ones that we can. And if we can't, you can join the NX community Slack, and someone will help you there, and we'll drop a link in the chat there also for the community Slack.
Yeah,
So
and
that
the community Slack is pretty huge now. Like we
yeah,
have 2,000 members
yeah, we
and
were at
counting.
yeah, I think we were at 2000. We were about 2000 members before NXConf, and I think we're around about 2700 now. So we definitely gained a good following from there from NXConf. But yeah, definitely go to the community page, join the community Slack channel, and like I said, we got a lot of people that are willing to help out in there. But Ben, did you want to add anything else before we jump right into it?
I think I know.
Okay, cool. But yes,
I'm cool.
okay, cool. But yeah, this, like I said, this one we want to talk about configuring workspace configuration or like getting the most out of your NX workspace configuration. And this is, I think this has kind of evolved over the lifetime of NX, but yeah, like Ben, what would you say? Like when we guess we're talking, we'll start like high level first, like the concept of the workspace and how that the concept of workspace and what kind of things you think about when we talk about NX workspaces.
Yeah, sure. So that's always good to bring back to the fundamental level of what is the workspace, what
Mm-hmm.
is the thing that you're working on, and this is kind of a generic thing, but to be able to work properly on any tools or code, you really need to have conventions, configurations, and
Mm-hmm.
assumptions, and also expectations on the thing, on the tool that you're using. And this is basically the what can I do,
Mm-hmm.
the where can I do it, and how questions. So really quick, the what can I do? It's basically all the Nx features. Where can I do it? On a folder somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
On what? Usually your code, the thing that you are working on, and how
Mm-hmm.
to do it would be your workspace or the Nx configuration. And this is really like a place somewhere where you can have a sort of contract between the all those expectation, convention, and assumption for your tool to be to to really be working well. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is like the contract between the place you're working on and the reality, like the expectation of the tool. And when you meet that contract, like you have a tool that can do all the things that you want and uh, like save you a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, um, those the workspace is basically a folder with a Git, which is linked to a Git repository. So once you start with Nx, usually use the command npx create Nx workspace, and
Mm-hmm.
everything, all those contract assumptions will be there when this command will be executed. So this is an Nx workspace is like a place where Nx knows how to deal with stuff. So this is really what it is, and I think that's kind of enough definition, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Yep, I think that's pretty good. Like I said, it's a basically it's a place where, in our case, for mono repos and things, we keep that as the workspace as the place where all your code and apps and libraries
Yeah.
go together. And of course, we add some things on top of that to kind of manage your workspace. And we'll, like I said, we'll talk about some of those things uh, as we kind of walk through some of these areas. Um, but yeah, so we got the kind of talked about like a workspace at a high level, uh,
Yeah.
and like I
A-
said,
And
uh,
we can
go
even
ahead.
jump on, yeah, we can even jump on the next subject
Mm,
because we talk about the Nx workspace. And funny enough, one of the main file for Nx to be able to work with
mm-hmm.
is called workspace.json or or the angular.json if you are like using the Angular framework. But essentially, those are the same.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I know that
so
we've kind of worked, and you can talk to this more also that
yeah,
we I guess like I said, over the lifetime of NX, the Angular it started out with the just more of an extension of an Angular CLI workspace, and then kind of have everything driven off the Angular JSON. And as we progressed and added more features, we kind of needed some more flexibility there, or it became expanded to cover more areas and kind of introduced the workspace JSON there. Um, so what do you like? What do you compare the two, or how do you use them or explain them to others when we talk about like that, like I said, that workspace JSON file?
yeah. So basically, the easier route is like saying, oh, Angular.json and Workspace.json is exactly the same
Mm-hmm.
because Nx is handling the Angular.json, like knows everything about it. So there is not really something that is left out. You still have your project, you still have your libs and all the schematics, the builders and
Mm-hmm.
everything. It's just that of like since the development of NX, we wanted to have more feature, more, like you said, more flexibility. So we kind of extended that notion of Angular.json and that notion of Workspace.json a little bit to be able to do more stuff, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that when you create an NX workspace with Angular, um, on top of your Angular.json, you have like a version 1. And that's basically saying, oh, we are using the Angular version, and we have to kind of do a conversion with the name schematics and builders into our own semantic, because we have the same concepts, but they're named differently. Like, for example, in Nx Workspace, vanilla, like the real one, you might say, we are using more concrete names like builders, executors, and generators. So generators are the equivalent of the schematics for Angular, but because they generate code, it's more like generators. And executor are the builders for Angular. So again, a difference in the name, but the output is the same.
Yeah, I
And
remember. I remember back when the schematics, or they were coming up with like names for the schematics, and I think they were called blueprints at one point in time. And I thought I was like, that's a pretty good name for
yeah,
that choice. And then they kind of diverged and call the thing schematic, or it was called, the engine was schematics and the thing was schematics. So it kind of like mashed those two things together. And
yeah.
then, like I said, we had a chance to kind
They
of,
also
like I said,
introduce
build on top of that.
they also introduced the architect name, and I don't know for you, but that was super confusing for me at first. Like, what is the architect? Like, doesn't really mean what it really is, like, and what it does. So in Annex, we also removed that name and changed a little bit. We still have the same functionality, but we replaced the architect name with targets. And yeah.
Yeah. So if I tracking you right correctly, we have the, at least between the differences between Angular JSON and Workspace JSON, is that for the most part they are the same. I mean, there's still a JSON file, still has projects in it. The main differences being, like you said, generators and executors, which are analogous to schematics and builders, and there was other part of it that you just, oh yeah, architect versus a target thing. So just people, when people are new to using or they may come across an NX workspace that doesn't have an Angular JSON in it and may see that version 2 in there, that
Yeah.
they'll see those things in there, and maybe not as familiar as
Yeah.
with the architect things.
Yeah, exactly. And that's basically it, because otherwise the functionality are really the same. It's just that now we support more functionality with the workspace.json, and like, for example, you can split this file with a by project file, which is pretty neat as well. Kind of offloading the configuration into multiple files, dedicated files for each libraries, which you don't have to do that. Like, the workspace.json is still like the control tower of your workspace. This is where you find all the configuration for all your applications, your libraries, um, and all the rest, like, basically. Also, uh, what
Yeah. So
what executor you want to use, or builders if you're using Angulars and everything. Yeah.
yeah. So you mentioned applications and libraries. Those are, well, I guess, the only two main types in a workspace that you can configure, right? Are applications and libraries, and each one of those can have those particular. Each one of them can have executors and executors and generators in it. Well, the executors and generators are mostly for applications, right? So can you talk about like the difference between when you would use when you would use one versus the, or where you would use one versus the other?
Yeah, sure. So really quick, An application, what we mean by when we say an application is basically a shell or something that produces a binary, an executable. Like,
Mm-hmm.
see, an application has an artifact that you ship. This is the only thing that contains an application. An application will use a lot of libraries,
Mm-hmm.
and an application will have the like minimal configuration of your application, but like even that you can kind of offloading that into specific libraries, so you really have like the minimal configuration, the viable configuration, the bare minimum lib to work to get for lib to working together, like for example, if you want to have lazy loaded routes, or
Mm-hmm.
and again, the lazy loaded routes will be only the like the depth 0. Like, this is I'm using that feature. I'm gonna use that feature into a lazy loaded route. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
using that route as a whole. But that feature has also um, routes underneath and can also be lazy loaded, um, a whole bunch of other libraries. So
Mm-hmm.
this is really the application is only responsible for how to build an artifact that is shipped to the user. That's the main thing. And for example, you could have two separate targets. So you have an application, yes, but you have like an application for uh, the desktop version, and you also have an mobile app. So that means that you have probably two separate applications, because depending on what technology you're using, like you don't want to have um, the mobile app technology messing with your artifact for the desktop app.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you may use Electron for the desktop, and you probably use native scripts or Ionic for the mobile app, or just plain native, and you just use the native with WebView and do something weird like that. But
Yeah, I think that's
that's to illustrate my point.
yeah, I think that's a good, like I said, good point though. That of course, when you're trying to build these multiple, just because you have multiple applications within your workspace, they could be using, like I said, you're using sharing that same source between different destinations, and those applications, like you mentioned, could be for different targets. Like you got your web app, and you got your native app that you may have. You may have some native app in there, or like I said, some other target that you're, or I don't want to call it target. I'll call it a platform because
Yeah,
add
that's
too many
better.
words in there, but have different platforms that you're producing a build for. Um,
Hmm.
and then, like I said, applications are those runnable pieces there, and libraries are the things that you use to. Uh, Libraries are built and shared with each other, and then you kind of use those up further in your features, and then those kind of things make up your
Yeah,
application there.
and, and I saw people getting sometimes confused, because there is that sense of library. They usually think, oh, but I'm not publishing anything to npm.
Mm-hmm.
So why would have a library, or I'm creating a library, but that library is on its own. Like, that's my feature. I'm not sharing any other stuff
Yeah.
that compose that library. And I'm saying that's fine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's totally fine. Like, you can have libraries that are not shared by anything. They just imported into the shell container, which is your application, and that's totally fine. Um, the way I see the libs, they they are there primarily for offloading the maximum of the business logic that you have from the application.
Mm-hmm.
So your application is only the shell and loading libraries, and your libraries are the ones doing all the heavy lifting, that contain all the custom logic, and some of them won't be reused at all. That will only be imported once in the application, and that's all. It's totally fine. You will have other types of library that will be more like shared or between other libraries, like utils library, where you have like something that's a dumb example, but it always works. Like something you want to convert with base 64, you maybe want to create a util library for that, because you know that whatever code you may encounter, you know that maybe you will reuse this piece of code. So that's totally makes sense for a library for util library to share that kind of code. And another one example for a library that maybe you don't want to share would be something like, hey, let's say that you create a dashboard, and your application is a dashboard of components, and your primary lib that enable all the dashboard features and everything is a shell library. So maybe you will have like a dashboard directory and then a feature shell, and that feature shell library will be where all the magic happens, because this is where you have like the place and the control to import all the other libraries, and you don't want to do that inside the apps.
Yeah, that was a good point you brought up there, where talking about libraries or the libraries that you can have, as far as the ones that you don't. Well, I guess when people generate a library, it looks like an npm library. You can import it like an npm library, but you're not actually publishing that outside of the workspace itself. It's still all kind of configured there internally in the workspace. I mean, in the workspace itself, so that the other applications and libraries can consume it. I remember
Yeah.
I was on a podcast learning with Jason a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that he really liked that part about NX, and that process was pretty seamless as far as generating a library that looked, like I said, looked like an npm package. You could consume it that way, but you didn't have to like ship it to npm first to be able to actually use it. So
Yeah,
that
you have
was.
access to the whole code inside the monorepo. So that's it's super great for discoverability. It's super great for implementing a feature and changing like the subsequent API of the thing that you need. Like for example, a library that you want to use doesn't have enough data, or like the public API of the library that you want to use doesn't have the feature that you want. So you can directly add it. And once you add it, like it's all in your commit or in your PR if you have multiple commits, and you don't have to wait for that library that has a change to be published, like another repo where you create the PR, you're waiting for the PR to be merged, then you're waiting for the next version of the npm package, then you can finally go to
Yeah.
your repo and update the version of that library so you can consume, and then you find out that you have a typo,
You
and then
ready?
you go back and yeah,
And you got to go
that
through the
thing
whole
doesn't
thing
happen.
again. Yeah. Yeah, it's like the open source model as far as publishing packages and things, but you get a quicker feedback loop, I think,
Yeah,
as far as
exactly.
not having to um, do that, not having
A-
to do that part.
Yeah, sure. And also the fact that Nx is really like gives you the hand, because it's so easy, like especially with Nx console, it's so easy to create libraries, and each type of libraries. So we have like the libraries, the default libraries that won't be buildable on their own and won't be publishable. But now you know that there are three kind of libraries. So the first one, which is the simple one, and the second one, which can be built separately, and the third one, which can be built and also publishable.
All
So
right.
that one will be like inside your monorepo, you have multiple. publishable library. So you have multiple npm artifact, and then you say you have a pipeline to publish those libraries. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, keeping on the topic of libraries, um, we usually when we talk about libraries, also, Santos said, not sure why I never use NX console. I always use the CLI. I'm right there with you, Santos.
Yeah.
I use
Same.
I use a mix of both. Actually, I always reach for always reach for like the terminal first, and then once I get tired of like typing in the wrong thing, then I was like, oh, well, I could have just used I could have just used NX console and let it do it for me. But my usual go to is usually the terminal. Like when I want to just try to generate something quickly. If I know like the flags that I want to use and those things, and that's usually my go to. I don't know
Yeah.
what is your preference?
Oh, me, like, I like NX console. I really like showing it to people. Uh,
It's good for demos. Like you say,
yeah,
hey,
it's
I don't have
super
to type
good.
anything.
It's super good, but I'm so used to you to the CLI. So, like, and also I'm using WebStorm, well, IDE from JetBrains. So,
Ah, there you go.
um, yeah, there is not yet a full support for NX here. We have community plugin for WebStorm, but somehow I don't use them.
Yeah, I saw someone actually saw someone posting on Twitter the other day where they were trying to get, or I don't know if they were trying to do this or they had it working or not, but they were using the dependency graph or showing off the dependency graph inside of WebStorm, and I don't know if that was part of that, like you said, that community plug-in, or if that was just something somebody was hacking on to try to get some more integration there.
Don't get me wrong, I think this is super great. Like, I really like seeing those kind of enthusiasm for NX. It's just that I have, I have my habits.
Yes, of course.
I'm
There's
old.
hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has their preferences, a way of doing things. So nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I slightly derailed us there for a second, but I think that's okay. But we were talking about the like the architecture of libraries, and there are few types of libraries that we talk about consistently. I believe usually like data access libraries or like shared libraries, and we also talked about like sharing between those things. So which are the at least a couple of the ones that you did like your usual go tos? Do you keep as far as like when you're working using in a workspace setting up the project? Do you tend to stick to one type of libraries, or which types of? It's a general question. Which types of libraries do you kind of promote when you are kind of implementing these concepts in your workspace?
Okay, so usually when I'm working on the workspace and I need to create libraries, I'm basically I'm either in two cases. The first one is like it's just a dump of library of code, so I don't really care what the type of library, because I know it's just to prove the concept. I don't want, it's just to tinker a little bit, and I don't care if I need to rename that library, because I can always use the NXLI for moving that library that will do the rename and everything. And I don't care if I need to delete that library, because I also can use the CLI to delete that library and that project. So that's the first case. The second case is when I know what I need to do. I have like a clear picture in my mind, and now I can do either one library if I know that all the code that needs to be there will make a whole, like has a cohesion between all his, well, if the code in itself is just a feature, I will create like a library feature. If I know that some code or part of the code need to talk to an API, or we handle WebSockets or whatever, I will kind of create a database, data access library. And if I know that this is only something a little, like transforming some utils function or a function that doesn't bring any framework, are not platform related, meaning that I'm not using window or document or whatever global that are available in a certain platform. And I'm not planning to import any framework feature either from React or Angular. I'm gonna use a util library. So that's usually what I do.
Okay. Yeah, because like I said, I've been digging around like I said, I had to tweak the NXConf website slightly, and then I kind of noticed, kind of just looking through kind of some of the patterns that you had in there as far as using feature libraries and kind of data
Yeah,
access libraries and putting those things together there. And then the way it was kind of structured up, like there was the smaller pieces for like even like the pages themselves were kind of broken down into smaller libraries, and then like the components inside of those pages were like a subset of that. So it's kind of like I said, built
yeah,
up this
yeah,
nice way to do
exactly.
that.
Yeah, and there are also like UI libraries where those libraries, they usually won't have any. We always have this term in UI where you have like a presentational component and then you have a container component. Usually, what I do is when I know that the feature that I'm working on will have multiple screens or multiple big components, and I need to tie them together. I will have like the container component, which contain all the logic, where you listen on the Nginx store, or you import your WebSocket or your GraphQL queries into that one, and then you feed basically all the presentational components that are inside UI libraries, that because they know how to react to the data on their public API, but the only thing that they need is the data, and the rest is usually static or static conversion, meaning there is no call to API for getting data.
I see.
So that's the presentational components.
Yeah, and that actually did bring up. It brought up another question that I had just from, like I said, recent. It's fresh in my mind from the NXConf site, but going back to kind of taking the design, because I was looking at like the Figma design for the website, and then how that was kind of broken down in the site itself. Do you kind of use though? Do you use any of that as kind of a guidelines on what you're kind of going to break down into different components, or how you're going to like configure some of the pieces in the workspace, or or do you just kind of build things out and from there?
Yeah, so okay, so it really depends on what you see in the Figma, what is the design or the thing that you want to implement. So I guess it depends on the feel that you have, but I tend to extract big chunk, and that kind of makes sense. Usually, when I need to get data from a container component or get data for a component to display things, this is where I'm gonna split. Each time that I'm passing data to something, I'm gonna split it. So you can have big components, but usually because of the split, you won't have the logic to get that data. So you don't really care about if it is well, it's always a synchronous component, because you will not have an async to get the data, because it will be always on the input. But usually I tend to not split into two small components as well. Like, for
I
example,
see.
if you have a membership card, I'm not going to create multiple component for, okay, so this is the component for the title, this is the component for the image, this is the component for, like, maybe the image, if I need to do some kind of computation for resizing the avatar of that member card, but that's as far as I can go. um, because usually the first thought that we have is we want to split everything into smaller chunks to be able to reuse them. But in the long run, from experience, you're never gonna reuse them because the design changed a little bit, from that member card in the home and the member card in a subsequent page. Those
Yeah.
look kind of the same, but not really. So now, if you want to reuse the component, you have to have a big if
Yeah.
inside your components with different classes, and this is where you start to have like um, more complexity, because now you need to have kind of a state inside your presentation component which is intrinsic to where what was the data and where it was placed. So this is not super obvious for people that didn't created that component at the first place, so it's never going to be reused. So yeah, this
Said,
is why I don't break too small.
yeah, I gotcha. There was Santos just have another question, and this question was, should you always go for buildable libs, considering an enterprise that have 100 plus libs? I'll say 100 plus libs. I've seen many more than that, many more build libraries than that. But um, I'll chime in here as far as using buildable libraries and versus not, and you can chime in also. But I think
Mhm.
for at least for like configuring or for your workspace, it depends on why you need those libraries to be buildable. Um, if you're doing something like trying to do something like incremental builds, or you have like maybe a component library within that workspace that has those libraries, different libraries in it that you want to maybe distribute or something like that, then maybe
Mhm.
you would use having them buildable that way. But I guess it depends on the use case, because that does having buildable libraries does you do have to have a little extra, which of course Nx takes care of most of this, takes care of this for you as far as building them in the right order and everything. But what do you what do you suggest for buildable versus non-buildable libraries within
Uh,
a workspace?
I would say it really depends on the amount of complexity that you want to maintain
Mm-hmm.
and you're comfortable with. Like, if you really don't want to have a thought about it, I would say don't go with that, because it will make your configuration a little bit more complex, and you will, as soon as you will set up the libraries, maybe you will have to convert existing ones into buildable libraries, and this is
Yeah.
where that you start to have problems, because sometimes those libraries use frameworks, or UI frameworks that doesn't um, build that well inside the ng packager that is required for the buildable libraries.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you will have to fix those issues. And also, if you're already using the Nx cache, well, you can. Well, the thing is, you will be able to also use the caching from Nx and Nx
Mm-hmm.
Cloud, but in both situations. So the gain is not that much. It's really if you know that you want to distribute those builds
Yeah.
in your CI, that now it's gonna shine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's where you want to use the incremental build.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Let's see.
But that's a good one, because if you want to if you want to really have the incremental build and use the distributed execution, it's done with Nx Cloud, and thank you for that. You will have to subscribe to it.
Hey, he said we're planning on using NX Cloud. Build times are going insane. Yeah,
Yeah,
you definitely have the option to use NX Cloud there. NX Cloud, in addition to incremental builds, to get some savings there, especially if your build times are getting up there. You want to break up the
yeah.
app and kind of take advantage of that. So, thanks for that question there. And I think that I think we're probably getting into. I think maybe I'll try to look back through and see if we have any other questions. But I did see
Mhm.
um, one question. I think this was a previous question that came through with from NXConf, but the question or the statement was from Evan, says there's repetition in ESLint and TSConfig files, and I think this kind of goes into like workspace configuration also about that, and wondering about if we're looking at uh, updating these and creating migration scripts for new, like when they migrate to a later version of NX. And I think this mostly comes out of the like we introduce some TS configs or introduce some base TS configs that you can extend from for like presets and things. But yes, I do think that if those are things that we'll have to update, then we'll have migration scripts for those. Because of course the goal is when you move from when we update your like workspace JSON or your configuration files, we want to make sure that you're on like whatever the latest. If we can update you, make sure you're on whatever the latest recommended practices are for that. So definitely want to make sure that those configuration files are updated and taken care of automatically, if at all possible. There was another question: is what is an NX target? I think we talked about that one, where a target is just something that you want to run against an application, or something that you want to run against the application, where it be building it or
Mhm.
serving it or linting it. It's just a task there. So, and those
Yeah.
tasks are defined, like you said, defined in the workspace JSON or in the project JSON, which I don't know that we cover specifically. Um,
Oh,
but can't, I guess
we talked
the
about
question.
it.
Okay. Yeah, I think, okay, you're right. You did cover it. I must have missed that one. But yeah, we were talking about like these things that are kind of help you along the way. And we'll kind of touch on like developer experience and how these things kind of help you out there. So, um, using like with your workspace, like what are the things that you can kind of like standardize on or tweak for your particular setup that makes things easier to use?
Yeah, so if you usually what we do is we kind of setting the defaults of all the generators or the
Mm-hmm.
schematics that we want to use. You know, if you want to create components, you can go into the workspace configuration and add all the default that you want. Like if you want, whenever you're generating a component, do you want them to be like inline HTML, or do you want it to be in SCSS or SAS or CSS only,
Oh
and
yeah,
all that. And you can also.
I got a quick question. We're talking about that, and this is Angular specific. Are you
Mhm.
inline styles and templates, or external styles and templates?
I'm inline style and inline template.
Hey, there you go. That's what I just wanted to see. I know people differ on whether they want the separate HTML and CSS or SAS. I also like inline templates and styles, um, and I
Yeah,
think it.
I like seeing everything that I need to see, especially when I'm working on the logic of a component. I want to be
Mm-hmm.
able to glance at the template, and I'm not. This is also a setup that how you're using your IDE is. I'm not using my with multiple file at the same time. I'm just like I have configured it to only show
Oh,
me
okay.
one file at a time, because this is how I can really focus on the thing. And I don't mind that the file is long, but I want to be able to see everything inside the file that handle the logic that I'm about to update.
Yeah,
So
I like
yeah,
that. I'm on board with that. I like to see the styles and everything, and I think it helps you notice when your component is maybe getting a little bit too
yeah,
big, and you need to
yeah,
break it down into a smaller. If you have like a smaller component inside there that you can like extract out of there. Um, okay, I just wanted to throw that one in there because we talked about configuring generator defaults, and my usual default is to uh, inline styles and inline templates.
yeah. It was really like that. And also with Angular, the fact that now with the later version, they have enabled the Sass compilation on the inline style, so you have like no
Yes.
incentive to create a different file for your style.
Yeah, Evan says it's odd. Comfortable with single file components for Vue and Svelte. With Angular, it feels odd. Yeah, I think the structure is slightly different on those, which makes well just because we have like components and decorators and things in Angular and Vue and Svelte seem to be more. I don't want to call them traditional, but they use like the style and the script tags like directly in the files themselves in the template tag, if I remember correctly, as opposed to like defining that in the decorator itself.
Hmm.
And I think there's always been discussion of there's been a discussion of a bunch of things that we've seen in other ecosystems that
Yeah.
trying to make it into Angular, but we'll see if they ever do anything like that. I've said this before also that about if Angular is going to ever introduce something like function components in there as opposed to class based components, but that's a pipe dream that we'll see if not Angular itself, maybe somebody will take it as a hack project and do a proof of concept on that. So
Yeah, even that's not enough, like because it needs to be vetted by the Angular team and then
yeah,
merged, and then so
well
can
yeah,
take
yeah.
years.
I wonder if yeah somebody could do it like even outside, not necessarily have to be vetted by the team, but like
Okay.
work within the confines of like the compiler and all that good stuff. So I remember seeing someone build a proof of concept of that using something that was Angular components, but they kind of looked like function components with hooks and things. So, but those, like I said, those are uh, a ways off, I would say. Uh, yeah. So what other? We talked about configuring defaults.
Yeah.
What are some
Also
other?
configuring the defaults for the package manager that you want to use, because sometimes you can be on the you can be wanting to use yarn, but you always forget to not say
I do
Nx
this all the
that you
time.
want to use yarn. So each time that you add a new library, is gonna use npm to run all the update of the dependency, and you're annoyed because now you have an npm shrink wrap file
I just
inside
got to
your
go and delete
yeah
this file every time and then run it again with the one that I want to use.
yeah. So there is an option on the workspace, like it's a package manager, and then you can configure it to be yarn, pnpm, or npm.
Yeah, PNPM seems to be gaining a lot of traction from what I've seen, just because everybody said it's a lot faster, or is
Yeah,
it's perceived as a lot faster, and you get some of those
yeah,
same
but there
benefits.
there is also a cost to it, because well, we tested it a long time on some internal project in the Nrwlian, but it brings few issues, or not all the project can use pnpm. That's the thing. you kind of have weird issue in the CI that you don't have on local, and you don't really
I
know
see.
why. And this is because of the way that PNPM is handling the dependencies. Some dependency needs to be like usually when you switch from YARM or worse npm to PNPM, you have
Mm-hmm.
to update your dependency and dev dependency because um,
Oh,
something
right.
has changed. You need to install more dependency that you were used to,
Mm-hmm.
and that sometimes can create issues.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't run into that specifically, but I could see if you were having to do some, like I said, having to do something that you didn't have to do before,
Mm.
and then of course like that, those things only creep up and bite you in CI. Like everything works locally, and then
Mm.
the PR should be fine, but then you run into issues there. So uh, let's see. I didn't see. Someone asked about project specific configurations, and we can talk about this really quickly, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up here if there aren't any more questions. But worry about project specific configurations leading to muddy waters. And I think the project specific configurations they're talking about is one that we introduced in NX12, a version of NX12, where you can have the separate project.json in each library or application in your I'll call it each project in your workspace. And uh, I guess from my perspective, I think it simplifies the configuration in the workspace JSON,
Mhm.
and creates that as just more of a reference point to where the other projects are. So, and then like even internally, just from talking to like Gregory and listening to him talk about how the work that they're doing there, is that they uh, basically combine that all into a one workspace JSON, like dynamically when you need to do something or operate on that project or operate on something in there. So
Yeah, yeah, and also if I can add something to it is
yeah, sure.
you when you split when you do the split like this, you will find that for some projects it is actually really beneficial because when you have like a library that needs to run multiple things before being even built or served, and you're
Hmm.
using the new depends on and the run command executor that we have at Nx, you start to have like a really long workspace.json if you're not exploding it. And that can be kind of confusing because of all those project and targets that needs to depend on other things.
Hmm.
Like there is a good example on the Nx repository for nx.dev where we have to do a rsync with multiple folders when we are serving the nx.dev website for the development. And we are using the depend on functionality for doing that, plus the run executor on Nx.
Hmm.
And if you have that on multiple projects and you're not exploiting that, like that's really easy to get a really frustrating workspace or workspace.json file, like
Hmm.
pretty huge. And like I know the case with Firebase, for example, when you have like a Firebase.json and you have multiple files because you're in a monorepo, multiple application because you're in a monorepo, and you have for each application you have a staging application. Is like at some point you just don't know what you're updating and which
Oh, right.
projects are you're touching. It's so
Yes, it gives
so
you a little
exploiting
bit.
the workspace.json could help you in the maintenance of your projects.
Yeah, I remember working on a large project previously, and that was one of the main sources of like merge conflicts also, because people were constantly, because we were like of course in active development at the time, and new libraries were constantly being created and wanted to kind of lower that friction that was happening there of new pull requests coming in. Everybody's changing the Angular JSON at that time,
Yeah.
and we had done a few things to kind of like mitigate that with like sorting the projects in the workspace JSON or Angular JSON to help with that also. But like I said, the next step was to make that to where those project JSON files live with the libraries themselves, and the workspace JSON just became more of a list of projects or, like I said, reference point to those different places, and they could freely tweak the configuration files without having without having more merge conflicts there. So
Yeah, and you can also transfer the ownership of that to like the team responsible for it.
yeah, it's definitely a good point there. Also, that was another thing that usually if you're using like code owners or something like that, then you have to like relinquish the responsibility of that file that is just being updated by anyone. And now you, like I said, you can distribute that responsibility to the team to update that, have control over who's changing that configuration for that particular project also.
Yeah, boundaries for the win.
Yes, definitely. Okay, cool. Well, I think unless you had something else to cover, I think that's a good place to end here.
The only thing that I can add is that don't hesitate to go to the Nx repository and
Mm-hmm.
look at all those files. Look at the nx.json, look at the workspace.json file, and how the nx.dev application, which is using Next.js,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to say when you're thinking of Nest.js. It's like it's just one letter. It's like, anyways, yeah, don't forget to really look at the monorepo itself, because most of what you are using on it, well, most of Nx is only in reality publishable library and buildable library. And when you check our CI, you can see that we are using Nx Cloud, and you can see all the
Mm-hmm.
distributed builds. So you have like a feel of what it could be for your project, for your monorepo. And I think that's kind of a really cool example, because this is an example with a lot of code, a lot of people that are contributing
Mm-hmm.
regularly, and a lot of traffic.
Yeah, definitely. Because, like you said, everything that from the docs, the packages are there. The NX or the website itself, all that's
Hmm.
managed within there. It's also built with NX, so we're
Yeah, yeah,
constantly testing our own stuff there. So, like I said, I just got the website up here for if you want to check that out at
yeah,
nx.dev. And like I said, I always see new stuff on the website also, because I know we're constantly tweaking the look and feel also. So definitely check that out.
yeah.
Like I said, if you want a good reference repository for a monorepo, definitely take a look at the NX GitHub itself.
Yeah, I think Nrx is also using
Mm-hmm.
Nx on the repository. I know Storybook are also using
Yep.
Nx. So you can always go there and see basically who is using Nx that has an open source project, and go see how they used to, because it will kind of open the possibility maybe that you didn't thought of what tags to use, what
Like
cloud
a structure.
or
Yeah.
cache, yeah, configuration structure, etc., etc. So that's a cool thing to
Yeah.
check.
Yeah, definitely. We are. I've been using NX in the Nginx repo for a while, and it definitely simplified our build setup there. And like I said, mentioned the other places also.
Yeah,
I'll throw this in here. NX Cloud is free for open source projects, so no
yeah,
need to worry about
and
having to pay anything there.
yeah, and definitely check all the CI configuration of those
Mm-hmm.
projects, because there is a lot of things that you could reuse directly.
Yeah, I'll drop a link to the NX repo here.
Yeah.
If you haven't checked it out before, so definitely check that out. Yeah, and I think that's about what we'll cover today. Thanks to all of those who came and hung out in the chat and asked good questions. We appreciate you, and we'll uh, definitely come back for have some more topics around NX and like also want to expand to like building things with NX. So so we talk about Next.js and things like that, but I think it'd be cool to have some stuff on there where we build some stuff also, have some topics or building with some of the things that we talk about also.
Yeah.
Because those are
Well, we could have an episode on how we did the NX.dev website.
yeah,
If folks want to know, like,
yes,
totally, we can totally do that.
yeah, definitely. We'll put that out there. If you leave a comment in the video, we'll do the whole YouTube thing. Leave a comment in the video. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the Nrwlian channel. If you made it all the way, if you made it this far, that means you got all the way through the video. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and get
Smash the
more.
like button.
Smash that like button and subscribe. All the YouTuber things. And definitely check us out there. Or also on Twitch, I must say. I don't want to leave them out also. So you can follow us there. I see people from Twitch in the chat also. So thanks for following the channel. And I think with that, we will see you all next time.